Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Research Community Manager for Sage Method Space, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Safari Webeleka from Bethel University in the U.S., Arceli Rosario from the Adventist University of the Philippines, and Anna Miller from Nord University in Norway. And we're going to talk about this handbook, Qualitative Research in an Asian Context, and particularly focus on some of the topics related to writing and publishing. But before we get started, if you are new to MethodSpace, this is a blog community sponsored by Sage Publishing, and we're interested in everything to do with designing, conducting, analyzing research, writing about it, sharing results in all different kinds of ways. And you can see at the heart of this diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we think whether you are a brand new researcher or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And that's why I love having these kinds of opportunities, because it's a great learning experience for me as well. So why don't we begin by just briefly introduce yourself. So Arceli, why don't you start?
Yes, I'm Arceli Rosario, and I'm from the Adventist University of the Philippines. I worked actually with Safari. We were together in our previous school at the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies in the Philippines. And with Anna, although we haven't met personally yet, but we have worked together in some projects. My interest, of course, is in educational leadership, but Safari has inspired me to be interested in qualitative research. And we have done some projects together, especially we work together in the Asian Qualitative Research Association.
Great. And Safari?
Well, Safari Wambaleka, I'm so glad to be back on this platform, sharing a little bit more on qualitative research. I work for Bethel University as a research professor. I love qualitative research, and that is really my interest, my focus interest for my scholarship. I really publish more on qualitative research methodology, and yes, I've worked with Arceli and Anna on different projects, and I look forward to this conversation.
And Anna?
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's such an honor. It's really great to see you all. So I am Anna Cohen-Miller, and I'm a multinational scholar who spent the last 8 years in Kazakhstan in Central Asia, where I had the opportunity to connect and build relationships and networks with Arceli, as you mentioned. Thank you, and with Safari. And build up research capacity and educational leadership. And now I'm a full professor at Nord University in Norway in the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. And my work in general, as I think of, is as a transformative educational leader and qualitative methodologist, that I focus on empowering and connecting communities to promote equity, inclusion, and justice-centered research. And then I do that in particular through arts-based and decolonial research, working to make research accessible and making these connections and linkages. Thanks.
Well, thank you to all of you for taking the time to chat a little bit today. We previously met Safari and Arceli to discuss kind of the qualitative methodology side of this handbook, but now we are in Academic Writing Month and thinking about the issues about writing and publishing and the ways that kind of as you've touched in and as viewers can see from our diverse locations coming together, thinking about, the kind of global community of scholars and the ability for a wide range of people to be a part of the conversation about kind of gaining, the understanding that we need, in our, to comprehend the challenges in our changing world. So, as we think about, the practical side of welcoming scholars from across the globe, into the, into the literature, getting published and discussed, what are some of the challenges that non-Western researchers face when, trying to write and get their work published? So, Arceli, do you want to start with that?
Okay, I think I would like to say that I'm president of the Adventist University of the Philippines, and we are a research university that is very meaningful to us, but we have many challenges in so many ways. This is now my second year as president of this university. I can see that our faculty, even our staff, are very interested in research, and they have been actively conducting research, making presentations, but our challenge is really to get published. And why can our faculty and staff not get into that level? For one, we do not have the luxury of writing time. And recently we have looked into that, and I'm happy because the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Saban, was also my colleague when I was at our former university. So we look at things in almost the same way, and we are saying, like, let's provide a structure so that we can have writing leaves in a year. How many days, how many weeks can we give to our faculty and staff so that we can write? And this one, of course, should be given to them like for free. I mean, like not deducted from their annual leave. So that's one. Lack of time. Another also is, of course, here in the Philippines, our challenge is we have not yet reached a level where we can say that our faculty have time to really do research. We do things, maybe you will be amazed how our faculty in this part of the world can have 18 units plus overload and plus do research. And so usually we only end up conducting, presenting, and not really to the writing level. So how do we solve this one? We do that. We still have some publications, but we want to increase, of course, the number of publications in a year. So how do we do that? Of course, we group our faculty and staff by teams, by teams. And in fact, just today, Dr. Grazel and I, we are here in Korea, and we talked about, should administrators like us also do research and also publish? That's our question. And we say, it's good if we can also do that too. And so I'm also doing research with, there's a team, I have a team now, I'm doing research. Why am I able to do that one? And we are really intent in publishing this. We divide, the work. And the good thing is I can see, even if it's my first time to work with these people, I can see that they are able. So in terms of being equipped, yes, I think we are at that level. It's only the luxury of time, plus really our load. Our teaching load in our university as of now is 18. But can you believe that some even have 21, some have 24? We want to reduce that one, but there are so many factors. But to me, looking at our how we can increase our level of publication is really to address the issue of time. And of course, the workload is also related to that one. Having really a writing leave and reducing our teaching load.
Okay, so those are, I think, important issues that people are dealing with all around the world with staffing challenges and changes to systems like tenure, where, in some institutions, there are fewer full-time faculty members, so the workload is really high. And so, to have the support of your institution and your administrators to understand, that this should be figured as a part of your responsibilities. So that's one area. What other issues are you seeing that are, kind of perhaps maybe more at the individual level? And Safari or Anna, what would
I
you
would
add?
I would say personally, one of the things that I saw both in Asia and Africa, because I just last year just came from working in Africa. Before that, I was in Asia. It's the language issues, because most of the publications need to be done in English. Textbooks are in English, and yet people have to deal with the local languages. And so writing in non-Western cultures is different.
Mhm.
And so presenting the ideas that will be the way to be acceptable in Western books and journal articles, that can definitely be a challenge.
So do you find that besides the simple thing of, English versus the first language, that it's also about kind of the style
Yeah.
and the ways that things are presented? Because, particularly in a journal article, there's sort of a form that we follow. There's a sequence, kind of a logic to it. But, perhaps that's not the logic that would be, natural to someone else.
I saw that actually even in my own teaching. I've taught academic writing for many years. The new students, I would always feel that from Eastern cultures and Western cultures are linear in writing, and that's what the journals go by. Many journals follow the linear style, while Eastern cultures, they have the tendency to go around to get to the point. So you find that, of course, the authors are going to be frustrated because the brain doesn't work like this. And eventually the editors will also be frustrated because people feel like they are moving, beating around the bush, but that's how they have been prepared in their culture how to write.
Right. Kind of more, working from a kind of the storytelling. And I know when I was working with doctoral students, we would say, well, in some kinds of writing, you might say, well, there's this, and this, and this, and therefore, here's my point. Whereas in scholarly writing, you need to say, like, here's my point, and then here's this kind of evidence, and here's this kind of evidence. So, it's definitely a kind of logic that may not come naturally to everyone. But then we have to also think about, well, what about the readers? Maybe some of the readers, would be more receptive to other styles of writing. But, we have kind of this form that's more generally accepted, that goes beyond, just the words on the page. It's really kind of how you think and how ideas are formed and legitimized and validated through the ways that you put it together. What else do you see, Anna, in working with people that you've worked with in so many different parts of the world?
Well, I was going to add on to these great points that you all have brought up. So Araceli, these organizational structures, and thinking about one point, I guess, about that is also if there's different options for tenure, right? So you mentioned Janet, right? So this tenure. So maybe not everyone has to be on a research track. And so if those who are on a teaching track, and this has been discussed, I know, for years internationally, how can we facilitate that. Okay, so there are those who are pedagogues. This is their passion, and so to help facilitate their work, and there's now various open access resources to be able to showcase. Here I can upload a syllabus, for instance, or some sort of module that then you can still track and measure the impact, which then could help, and then that could relieve those who are more interested in research, and that then they have that more the chance for a mentoring structure, which Safari and Arceli, you did brilliantly in putting together this book. That so when I was invited to write a chapter, I was then told, okay, you'll be working with somebody else, a junior, colleague,
I see.
and I didn't know that person at first, and so having the chance, and we still haven't met in person, but we've developed this relationship, and we were able to write together and learn from one another. That then created a structure that I hadn't seen previously, which it was then built into the writing. So the mentoring then was not also just separate. That's also another thing that often is discussed. Oh, we need more mentoring of, early career scholars, of women, of people of color, of those from, non-Western traditions. But it's often done informally instead of here. It's actually part of the structure. We recognize this is important. It's valuable. We need these insights. And so that aspect, and then thinking about, just to add on to the linguistic side and thinking about the structures, this relates back to, so my mindset is always around this equity and inclusion, and thinking about that, it's also the access to resources, accesses to journals and to publications, and that there are some journals that are happy to have actually the narrative style and want or are promoting that type of maybe it's a special call that is looking for that type of writing, whereas many others are looking for more of the traditional scholarship. But to not have access to, whether it's the individual chapters or if you're not a part of an institution. So I was lucky in Kazakhstan. I was part of an institution that had the connections to be able to individually request a chapter or an article, for instance. But without that, there's this huge gap then that how do we train or make those connections or build the capacity around language and around writing if we don't have the way to read about and share those resources? And so that then it sums up thinking about the organizational and some individual structures.
I just want to highlight a couple of the key points that you made, which I think might be suggestions those who are watching this could consider. The kind of partnering of a new or emerging, or just someone who hasn't had the experience of writing an article or chapter with an experienced person to, have that, kind of mentoring in action rather than in a kind of hypothetical situation, but to really be working together, to put the piece of writing together. I think that's a great strategy. I'm a big fan of mentoring, and I feel that, it's one of the things that, as an experienced person, we can, look at as a responsibility and a way that we can give something back and hope to kind of enlarge the participation in the scholarly conversation. And then, the other issue about access, is certainly a concern. And I think, luckily, more journals, are going to an open access model, and, there are more resources that are available, but we're still, somewhat constrained. And if you don't have access to, or perhaps you don't have access to the most recent issues of the journals, that can be problematic. I mean, we think of like how much things have changed. I mean, when I'm looking in the databases at literature, I mean, yesterday when I was looking for some things, and where you have the chance to put the time parameters, and I thought, well, I really need like after 2020, because the thing that I'm looking at, has changed so dramatically. So, if you're someone who only has access to, the print versions of books in the library, or a limited scope of the journal databases, that can, certainly be an issue for your literature review, and for, really being able to bring in, kind of the latest ideas. Another point that I wanted to ask you about, in chapter 32 of this book, you talk about research in a multilingual setting. And one of the questions that I had, or one of the issues that seemed obvious to me, is that it's not only that the researcher needs to write the article in English, but how do you deal with data that, when we're doing qualitative data, we've got transcriptions from interviews, we've got perhaps media like the interviews, focus groups in a setting like we're in now, or written documents that are in a variety of languages. So then is the responsibility of the researcher to translate, because translation is a whole nother skill set. You might have an understanding of it yourself, but to be able to present it in a way that others, that accurately reflects what that participant said. So, how do people deal with those issues, and what strategies, what do you suggest?
Well, there are so many challenges, and that's the reason why we presented that chapter. There are so many challenges as far as multilingual settings are concerned. And most Eastern countries, they are multilingual in nature, most of them. So some of the challenges that came across, that we have seen, and those that come from the literature, you have, for example, a lot of qualitative research books written mainly in English. Therefore, people are learning qualitative research in their second language. We have issues of expressing ideas in English, ideas that would have been expressed much better in the first language, either the language of the author or the researcher, or the language of the participants. We have issues of people, like this is something we saw in the Philippines, where even though the researcher and the participants share their mother tongue, they still prefer to use English for their interviews. Somewhere I remember even myself conducting some interviews where some local languages will come in the interview, and I don't understand, as a foreigner, I don't understand what they're talking about. I just kind of infer the meaning of what was happening. We have ethics that are different in these Eastern countries as opposed to Western countries. Western countries have a lot of rules that are already preset legally that we have to abide by, while in Eastern cultures, we want to be community, want to be friendly. So a lot of the things may not actually work. Recently, I was conducting another study again in the Philippines, and I was told, for people to participate in your study, you need to make sure that the person who will recruit them is the president of the university or the vice president, because if you go directly to the people, it's not culturally acceptable. Here in the West, that's like, no. These are adults. They will have to give their if I do that, I'm influencing, I'm coercing them to participate. But in that case, it was different. And then we have issues of publishing, which we had already talked about. So in this chapter, we actually discuss strategies, how to deal with each one of them. For example, in the fact that books are in English, for example. This is one of the reasons why we put this handbook together, to present the same concepts that we have in the existing literature in a language that people can relate to, and illustrations that they can relate to in the Asian context. And I know we're having this conversation, Janet, just several days ago, that you could see that we're covering many of the common topics. But when you go into the handbook, you'll find that we are really presenting things from the Asian perspective so that people can understand much better. And of course, we have recommendations of collaborating, maybe collaboration between native speakers and the people from multilingual who are not native speakers of English. If you're planning to publish in a Western journal, and many other strategies that we talk about there.
Well, it certainly seems like they're, I mean, publishing, doing research and publishing is, it's a lot of work, in any situation. But it seems like, if the data includes, voices speaking in multiple languages, that, or perhaps, kind of going back and forth, being in English, and then maybe there's some idea or feeling or concept that is really better in the native tongue, kind of switching back and forth, and then the researcher has to try to interpret. Have you encountered that in your work, Anna?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Safari. You've really summed up so many aspects that I was thinking about. And in the chapter, of course, then we can read more. And what was coming to mind then also as, a key aspect of thinking about the different languages, and so you're saying the collaborations and really embedding that throughout, right? Coming in from the beginning, recognizing that we're working with different languages, we're working with different cultures, and that while it's a challenge, it's also a great opportunity and can be applied, and I would say should be applied in any context. That wherever we are, there are differences in understanding and various types of cultures where sometimes we think even within an organization that we have the same mindset. And so instead, if we can take these ideas from the handbook, so thinking about, okay, so in the Asian context, we know that there's the different languages, and thinking about the different cultures, and we can then transfer them wherever we go, to not assume, to move away from assuming, oh, look, we look the same, we speak the same language, and therefore we must think the same or experience life the same. So recognizing the multicultural aspect, working with translators, working with, we found in Kazakhstan that even when there was the research team that depended, even when they were trained as translators, it was important to find the time. And I'm big on having that chance to critically self-reflect and to talk together. And this is where interdisciplinary work, this is how we help to address these large scale issues, these wicked problems, and to come from different perspectives, and to see that, the translators were perceived differently, and the researchers who were trained as translators, oh, well, why are you speaking that dialect instead of this one? You should have used this word. And to talk about it and share about it. And so we can learn from each other, and we can hear about the failures, right? The supposed failures, and actually recognize that we're not alone in this process. And this is one thing that I love about this conversation, just in general, to recognize that all around the world, we're not alone, and we can learn from each other.
So, to going on to highlight chapter 36 that kind of stood out for me from the handbook about publishing qualitative research paper, which I think, I hope that for viewers who are listening to this conversation, to see, the kind of larger process that needs to go on behind the scenes, from where we began talking about kind of the institutional structure, to value the need for time, and the need for mentoring and collaboration, for understanding across different languages, that we have, some additional components that are needed, to the process. But, as we get down to, actually, getting that paper ready and submitting it, Safari, why don't you start and talk about some of the points that you were highlighting in this chapter, and some strategies that you might suggest to people who are watching this video.
Yes, I'm passionate about guiding people on how to write for publication. I've actually published another book on that. I think it's entitled Publish or Perish, Fear No More. That is the title of the book. And there I address both quantitative and qualitative research, but it's the most important thing is that you can really follow the qualitative side as well. There are many different topics that we address in this chapter within this handbook. Basically, we talk about scholarly writing, because sometimes people may conduct their study well, they understand qualitative research, but when it comes to scholarly writing, that's where the problem is. And so we present some practical strategies, again, just for people who may be scared of publishing, for people who may be new to publishing, practical strategies on how to write scholarly. We focus on methodology, what to watch for when you are preparing your methodology section in your paper. We talk about the importance of publishing, because some people just literally publish because they don't want to perish, but it should be more than just avoiding being perished. I mean, losing the job. Let me just put it like that. We talk about funding, because there is a lot of journals that require money, and even if they are not predatory journals, people always think that if you ask for money, it's a predatory journal. So no, it's not, because even Sage, I think, has some journals where you have to pay a fee, and Sage is one of the best of the world, if it's not the best of the world. And so there will be an issue of funding. When you look at journals that are published in the West, publication fee can go anywhere from $200 to $1,500 US dollars. For somebody whose salary is $100 a month in a developing country, asking them to pay $150 or $1,500, that right there is an issue of access that Anna was talking about. We talk about how to prepare the manuscript, how to select a journal, the different criteria people need to look into, especially that we have a lot of predatory journals. And we talk about some challenges that are common for non-Western scholars when they are trying to publish, and how to deal with those challenges. And that is more or less what we cover in that chapter.
What are some of the other issues, Arceli, that you see with your faculty and researchers that you work with in the Philippines?
I think, yeah, Safari mentioned about looking for journal. Where do we publish, especially here? So we have this discussion. Do we really require our students or faculty to publish in a Scopus Index journal? Because that's the kind of thinking here, that's the goal to achieve, that you should publish in a Scopus Index journal. So we ask ourselves, is that really what we require? Or publishing in a peer-reviewed journal, a referee journal, is acceptable for us? So this is the discussion that is going on here. We do not have the right answers yet, because you see, as universities, we have to be accredited, and some accrediting bodies require, you see, like a higher level of they rank the journal. So I think finding which journal to publish, which is acceptable to accrediting bodies, and even to the general public, you see, like, oh, so their faculty publish in this kind of journal, and there's kind of reputation there. So that's one discussion. The other one, of course, is the capability building. How do we empower our faculty so that when they publish, they don't get discouraged because You see there is higher acceptability of their papers. So capability building on this one.
Mhm.
And we have talked here about collaboration, researchers and scholars from developing countries collaborating with researchers and scholars coming from developed countries. So that's actually what has happened in when we planned and eventually published the SAGE Handbook of Qualitative Research in the Asian context. I remember Safari and I talking and saying that we should be intentional in pairing, putting together authors. You see, Janet, we intentionally encourage people to group themselves, at least by twos. I cannot remember, Safari, if we have a chapter with only one author. We really said there should be at least 2, 3, 4 authors together, and 1 or 2 should be more experienced, already published. And we were intentional in looking for Asian authors, those who have experience, but are not yet visible in terms of, you see here, Janet, forgive me for saying, we are prideful here that we were able to publish at SAGE. And so to our colleagues who eventually got there, you know, their chapters got published. It went through a very long process of back and forth. But eventually, when they saw their names being published, it's a big thing in a developing country. And so now I'm very happy to say that these are the people who are also mentoring. And, you know, I remember how we connected with Anna. So I am saying here, all these dynamics going on so that we can reach this level of publication, this collaboration. Anna just happened to be sending messages in our Facebook page. And I said, this lady is like persistent, is really following us. And one day we just decided to meet each other through Zoom. And then after that, he said, would you like to join? And Anna was the lead author. And with her were 2 others. So this idea of collaboration, of mentoring, of lifting up scholars from our side of the world who do not have this access. Some haven't even heard of what journals are there, and how do we write so that we can be accepted.
Well, there are a couple of points I'd like to highlight, and then I'll go to Anna. It occurs to me that, you know, I mean, one of the issues too is that we talked about, say, the almost physical side of access to journals, like can you get the journal and read the articles? Can you download the chapters,
Yes.
etc. But then, you know, the other thing of say, well, you know, are you you know, someone who is you know, from a developing country, from an Asian country, you know, if everything you're reading is research from the West. So it's like, you know, how can you, you know, what are the channels to share what you've learned about the issues in your own culture, especially for qualitative research, where we're getting into, you know, what's the experience of these problems? You know, how are people contending with the personal, social, cultural changes, and you know that you know would be relevant to the readers within your own culture. So you know, it seems like that's, you know, one you know, kind of issue that's you know, on the larger scale of, you know, having journals that really, you know, serve your culture, rather than only thinking about, you know, getting into the publications that will reach other readers from around the world. So, you know, kind of both are important, but, you know, those are issues. And then the other thing that I think inherent in, you know, we've been talking about the process behind this book. And I know that, you know, in some situations, people are in book chapters are not counted in there, you know, as a scholarly publication. So people don't see that as being kind of a valuable part of their publication strategy. For my own experience, I felt that when I started contributing book chapters, that there was, much more, while I didn't have the kind of mentoring experience that was offered in your book process, that, the editor, provided some guidance, provided, kind of almost a role model of what does an editor do. And that the back and forth was much more supportive and, really helped to build your confidence as a new writer. So, kind of, looking at the value of publications like a book chapter that, is also, adding to the really important how-to practical literature, from the reader's side. And then, of course, being the manager of a blog and looking at the value of those kinds of informal writings for newsletters for your scholarly society, for blog posts for academic blogs that may be, in some cases, a lot of journals are starting to have a blog in addition to the formal peer-reviewed journal, because, it's important to start to get some of, there's some things where there's a real timeliness about getting the information out from a study that, we want to get something out even while the process is underway for a longer journal article. So, I think, looking at a more diverse outputs and valuing the work that goes into some of those outputs, and, and seeing those as, kind of a developmental process that also, serve a very valuable scholarly purpose, kind of across the spectrum. But what else would you add to that,
I
Anna?
want to add, Janet, may
Yeah.
I?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Araceli.
Yes.
And then I'll hop out.
Oh, yeah. What I really liked with our experience in writing the book was that we guided the chapter authors to look into what had been written on the topic. For example, I worked with two other co-authors when we did the photo voice chapter. And Anna and I also had conversations about how she was doing photo voice. And at the time, it was just like the pandemic. And she told me, like, we're doing photo voice online. And so I got very interested about that one. But for us also, my co-authors, and that's like the pattern of almost all the chapters, especially in the research design, our instruction was look for what studies had been done using photo voice in Asia. So you see, we opened ourselves to what had been done in Asia. Not only how do you do photo voice and all the other designs, but we began to appreciate. And for my co-authors and myself, we said, oh, so Asian scholars and researchers have also started doing photo voice in different parts. So we were very intentional. So we said, were there photo voice studies done in Sri Lanka? How about in this part of Asia? How about in this part of Asia? And we're so amazed. So it's like an appreciation of what's been already going on and our tendency as Asian scholars and researchers, not maybe all, but the tendency is to look for what's in there in the literature from the West. Why? I think the reason is the accessibility. When you search for this, it's so accessible. Immediately, like what things pop up are those coming from the West, from developed countries. But we found out if we are intentional, we can find. And then we also become aware, oh, so this topic, for example, very recently, there's one, also, this is a SAGE book also, Janet, and I was invited to write, and I invited another one to write with me. And it's about Asian worldview. And I struggled so much. I said, oh, not much has been written about Asian worldview. And what's amazing, Safari, is that it's Pavel, a Russian. I think, Anna, you know Pavel also. I co-authored with Pavel, I said, because he's into philosophy. And we had this discussion. I said, Pavel, thank you for helping me understand the Asian worldview. So you see, it's possible that even somebody from the West can help, like in my case, help me understand who I am, my way of thinking. And so this is what we are doing here, in spite of our deficiencies, these connections, this interconnectedness with different parts of the world. And I encourage, our viewers here, don't say, oh, I'm from a developing country. In my case, I've been so amazed how other scholars, how other researchers are so open and so generous that we can have access and we can also grow to a level that is desirable.
I was going to add on, right? So where we can grow, that's exactly what I was going to mention, Arceli. So a lot of this conversation is about, been thinking about it, or as we've mentioned, research capacity and linguistic capacity and learning and building. And yet I can flip it, right? I grew up in the West, right? In the US, and I pass as white. And the process of collaborating with others who are different from me and grew up in different ways and from a different background, it makes me better, right? It's ultimately very selfish, right? That, I become a better researcher, I see things better, I get more insight, and it can ultimately also create more inclusive research. So both in, this wonderful mentoring model, right? That y'all set up to have that mentoring in action, this phrasing, there's that. And so, okay, I got to, help lead a chapter, and yet I learned from my co-authors. And for any of those, those of us who are teachers, that we know we learn from our students, that it's not that we're all knowing, and instead our students teach us tremendously. And those I work with, the more that I work with others from other places, from, I like the phrasing of majority world, right? The majority world, it makes me better. It makes my curriculum better. It makes it more inclusive. It gives me that chance to be purposeful, as you were saying, Arceli, about looking for those studies, right? Who am I referencing? When we look, and I've done this with colleagues in Kazakhstan, we've done gender audits, for instance, of curriculum, of syllabi. Are we only referencing, when we look at, research, particular people with a particular background and a particular worldview? And if we are, then we can purposefully look to include others. Where are the voices from the Philippines? Where are the voices from various other worldviews, which makes our work better and makes our students better, it makes then us being able to move forward into a world that, I think all of us care about: social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, and we need that diversity in thought. And if we do that, then purposefully we're looking for that, we can find it, as we hear, and we can think about and look for the various sources of publications in informal public scholarship and across the literature.
Well, I think we've highlighted, a number of different important factors, from the administrative to the personal. And I like the way that we're concluding this conversation by really looking at kind of the experience of being a scholar, that, we need to be curious and learning and enriched by our experiences. We're not just, workers who are producing outputs of scholarly work, but, people who are engaged with, kind of an unfolding, understanding of, ourselves and the world. And especially as qualitative researchers, we certainly come with that mindset. So thank you all for joining this conversation. Do you have any kind of parting suggestions for our viewers before we conclude?
I just want to reemphasize what Anna was talking about, and she was following up on what Arceli said. This idea of collaboration, I think it has a lot of synergy in it. And one aspect dimension that I like that she mentioned is what I refer to as scholarly humility. When people who come from the power background, like the West, when they collaborate with people from the East or from any developing country, even if it's not the East, they need to understand, we need to understand, I need to point out myself because I live in the West now. We need to understand that we learn from one another. Somebody may not be very good in English, but they know other languages.
Mhm.
They will bring in input that wouldn't have gotten just by the Western mindset.
Mhm. Well, thank you all, and I hope that for the viewers, you'll take a look at some of the related resources we'll publish together with the video, as well as information about how to access this book. So thank you very much.